Hey now, we are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times. With episode 663 of your favorite professional wrestling podcast. That's right, Getting Over is back once again, and it is Thursday, so you know exactly what that means. We are here to break down everything that happened across NXT and AEW over the last week. AEW very soon has Full Gear coming up. NXT, a much longer delay until deadline approaches in December, but we still have plenty to discuss across both brands, so we're not going to waste any time getting to it. Allow the Silver King off the top to remind you that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
is all about Defy.
So head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast and follow us on Blue Sky at Getting Over. You can also subscribe on YouTube at Getting Overcast. Please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I sure hope you do as well, because folks, for $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Over head. Visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. If you do, you will get the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reaction audios to every major TV show, and exclusive news analysis posts every week. You can get all of it and support the continuation of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast by visiting buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Now, we have a ton to talk about on today's show, as we always seem to when it comes to NXT and AEW. Really, we have a ton to talk about on every single episode of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. That's why we do it the way we do it. So we're going to kick things off with NXT as we usually do. We'll move into AEW during the second half of the show, if time allows, and depending on the time we finish, we might have a discussion about the ratings for the show at the end. As always, I hope you listen to the entire show, even if you jump around from one to another, with timestamps in the episode description. So let's get it going with NXT. Trick Williams opened hour 2 of the show, calling out Ridge Holland. Instead, Andre Chase came out, and he came out of the crowd, saying he's not done with Ridge yet. Williams put Chase over for all of his success in NXT. Then he pointed out he's never actually gotten a chance at the main title. That led Holland out to legitimate massive heat. I was surprised, actually, how loud the crowd was jeering for him. Holland talked about pinning Williams. He told Chase he's moved on from the university. Chase wasn't having it and demanded another match. Holland flatly denied him. So Chase put the university on the line. Ridge again declined. He said he's solely focused on the NXT title. So Trick set up a number 1 contendership for them, the winner facing him at deadline. As Williams praised Chase for having close relationships with all of his students, a light bulb went off, and Holland said he decided he wanted a stipulation added, the end of Chase U for good, should he beat Chase. Chase delayed, but ultimately accepted. Holland threw a forearm, but Trick did bookend, and they combined for Chase U stomps to end it. Chase U angrily confronted Chase backstage about all of this. He said the whole university was built on taking risks like he did with all 3 of them. He promised not to let anything break them up, saying he's excited to finally get this opportunity and take them all to the highest of highs. The others, of course, were nowhere near as convinced. I did not expect this extra step of Chase getting involved here. Thought they were setting up for a loser leaves NXT match, just the way the segment went on, and that immensely concerned me. Potentially ending Chase U. I get it on the surface. A faction like that can only work for so long, and they've been around for years at this point. Thea Hale will be fine without it. Duke Hudson might be able to make it. I'm not so sure about Chase himself and Riley Osborne in modern WWE. He's super talented. Both of them really are, but I don't know how they fit exactly. Now, I don't know anything specific, but perhaps Chase is leaving or something, and that's how they're trying to put a bow on his character. Would be surprised given the types of reactions that he and the group engender if that's what was happening. But at the same time, it's not like you could just bring them all up to the main roster as is. You know, Thea in particular and Riley are not ready yet. Beyond that, I don't see completely why Holland needs to win a number one contendership when he just pinned the champion last week. I know it's a tag team match, but nevertheless, he pinned Trick Williams. When it comes to typical WWE booking, that's generally enough. That said, I prefer them doing it this way and Holland actually earning the opportunity to this degree rather than just kind of getting the match and us being led to assume he's suddenly ready to become a number one contender for the title. Maybe that's even more reason, though, why he shouldn't have pinned Trick last week. He should have possibly pinned Bubba Ray. And then you have Trick, wanting to get revenge for Bubba. And he sets up this match. And then he actually goes and fights Holland after the fact. There's always the possibility that Chase wins, or there's a no contest and it goes to a three-way. I would prefer both of those options if given the choice. I really don't want to see Chase U end. And I would be interested in seeing Chase wrestle with Trick because Chase actually gets amazing matches out of tons of people. And in a one-on-one match, Trick and Ridge, you need someone to help from a wrestling standpoint. So looking ahead to next week, my prediction is some type of no contest, and this winds up being a triple threat. To me, that makes by far the most sense, but we will see what happens. And if it's the end of Chase U, that will certainly be a conversation topic for this show. Julia and Stephanie Vaquer fought the Meta Girls. Vaquer's full entrance in the WWE Performance Center is really sick. The way they utilize smoke and these red and orange lights, she looks amazing. Same goes with Julia, now that it's finally been refined. Vaquer took out Jakara Jackson with her thigh driller. I keep coming up with different names for it, and I don't exactly know which one is correct. Jackson later jumped off Lash Legend's shoulders to do a sky-high tope crossbody. The setup was kind of dumb, but it did look cool. Julia wrecked shit on her hot tag, flipping Legend into a code red, then catching her with a missile dropkick off the apron. Jakara nearly stole a fall from Steph, but Julia tagged in for a missile dropkick, with Vaquer hitting the package backbreaker and the faces combining for a stereo Kamagoye. You may know it as the BTE trigger for the win. Julia and Vaquer shook hands afterward, each said a line after the bell when it was announced that they're going to be competing in Iron Survivor qualifying matches. The promos are still coming along for both of them. They're still learning English. And until they become more fluent, it's going to be these single line promos from them. Most impressive here were actually the Meta Girls, just holding their own against far better and more experienced talents. They have really leveled up their game of late, working on SmackDown, working against them. Julia and Steph, they are great together as a team. There's a legitimate argument to be made for them winning the women's tag team titles. You could even have them do it sooner than later and push off their main championship contention for a few months, just given they're going to completely run this division in 2025, assuming they're staying and not getting the Dragon League call-up quickly to the main roster. So I would love to see them go on a tag team run. I think it would make a lot of sense, give them a little bit of main roster exposure, give people more reason even to watch NXT. Will they do it? I doubt it. It's what I would do if I had the book. Let's move to the Iron Survivor qualifying matches. The first, Sol Ruca against Cora Jade. Basic tape promo from Cora before the match. Jade hit the ropes to prevent a Ruca springboard. Sol avoided a DDT, caught Cora, having run into the turnbuckle with Soul Snatcher for the win. Easily the right decision. Soul Snatcher in the Iron Survivor match, that could be spammed like a video game finisher. It could be quite a sight seeing her get one fall after another with that move. Beyond that, look, Cora is still fresh coming back, and her friend is the champion. She did not need to be in that match at all, and I'm glad they made the decision to not include her. The women's tag team match to open the show got a ton of time, but I was a little disappointed this felt rushed. They're both experienced enough to be able to go in the ring for 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes. They didn't get that much time, but it was a sensible finish, and again, the right winner in Sol Ruca. Cedric Alexander fought Wes Lee. Ced completely missed a tope, landing on his feet just beyond the ring apron. It was close, and he's lucky it was a simple botch and nothing worse than that. Big yikes right there. Alexander countered cardiac kick with a basement dropkick, adding an apron uranagi and a step-through flatliner. Wes came back with a ripcord super kick setup into a cardiac kick for a surprise false finish. Ced avoided a high risk. He took Wes's head off with a lariat, but Wes pulled off the middle turnbuckle, threw it at Ced, then he hit a Michinoku driver for a delayed count false finish. Wes took out Ced's knee, and his head hit the exposed turnbuckle. Then he came back with a Meteora cover for the win. I did not expect this to go as hard as it did. Obviously wanted Alexander to get the dub, but we all knew coming in Lee would take it. It's unfortunate because I would actually like to see Alexander get a run with the North American title or the tag team championship. I told you I would love to see him with Javon Evans be tag team champions in NXT. I just think it makes so much sense to run with that. And they're not going in that direction right now. I know he's a veteran and he's helping the neophytes on the brand. I get all of that, but he's still one of the best wrestlers on the entire show. And his ceiling is a lot higher than he's being booked right now. Again, Wes was the expected winner. He was probably the right winner for the Iron Survivor match. Even if I feel like he can probably get crossed off from taking it, I don't think he's going to win Iron Survivor, but for him to be in it will make it an exciting match. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he will win. I don't know. Match totally over-delivered to expectation, not because of their talent. We know they're talented, but they got a lot of time on a loaded show and really, really showed out. 3.75 stars, B+. Javon Evans fought Lexis King. Evans did his seated springboard Hurricanrana. I should say springing Hurricanrana. It doesn't really springboard. With a tope chaser. There was a botch, I believe, with King not bending down as Javon did a leapfrog. That led to a low blow. King sold it as part of his gimmick, so maybe it was purposeful, but it just looked like a botch. Evans kipped up into a cutter, then kipped up again on the landing from a suplex. He followed with a springboard crossbody, but missed an incredible moonsault. He ate a super kick on the landing. Javon ended a sequence with his rebound kick and a frog splash. King answered with a backstabber and a leg hook Michinoku driver, but Evans caught him with the double jump tornado splash for the win. These moves need names. This is a major problem across all of NXT. Like 85% of the talent have finishers and other signature moves that just don't have names. Somehow, Kalani Jordan has 4 different names for her moves, but like Javon Evans has 0. It doesn't make sense. It pisses me off. Naming moves is integral to having successful professional wrestlers. Javon offered a handshake after the bell, and it was accepted. And the idea is that King is now a babyface, and everyone is starting to come around to that fact. Couple of weeks in a row, I've said it now. This was King's best match in NXT. Evans obviously played a huge role in that. Javon was also the obvious and correct winner here. He will show out massively in Iron Survivor. This was longer, and it was also more intricate than I expected, but it was valuable to see both of them get this much time and for King to come across as well as he ultimately did here. He's still not a great wrestler by any means, but at the same time, he can go enough when matched up with a better talent, which Javon is in this case. I'm telling you, this is a surprise. I went 3.5 stars and a B. Jada Parker in a tape promo talked her talk, guaranteeing not only that she would qualify for the Iron Survivor Challenge, but that she would win the entire deal. Zarya got a tape promo package as well, saying she's not a mystery, but a fearless warrior ready to tear apart NXT. She said Iron Survivor is the exact type of chaos she is seeking, and there will be no more mystery about her once Deadline is over. Passionate, motivational promo with plenty of fire from Ms. Parker. As always, she is dynamite on the mic, only gets better by the week. For her first promo, Zarya, she spoke better than most women in NXT and most already on the main roster as well. It lacked depth. There were really no details about her character, her motivations, but as an entree, a setup to kind of introduce her to people, it was fine. And it's also just ahead of her qualifying match, so presumably she will have more opportunities to speak leading into the Iron Survivor Challenge. It's going to be curious to see whether one or both are ultimately in the match. Parker seems like an absolute no-brainer. Zarya would have to be a given because there's a qualifying match, unless it ends in a disqualification or something. It makes me think one of Julia or Vicaire will not be involved, maybe both, and that's something that we've discussed previously. The Women's North American Championship was on the line. Fallon Henley defending against Kalani Jordan. Lonnie was juiced for her rematch backstage when the rest of Fatal Influence interrupted her, talking their normal shit. Jordan showed a bit more personality and attitude here, but it did still seem kind of forced. This main evented the show. Lonnie completely missed a moonsault off the announce table. This is the second time in as many weeks that has happened. Henley did a swinging kick around the ring post, which was really cool. Lonnie did a cartwheel elbow, which was completely nonsensical. Then she went to do Rolling Thunder, but modified with a shooting star finish, but it barely landed. Just do the regular Rolling Thunder next time. It's totally fine. Henley prevented One of a Kind coming back with a flying blockbuster. Lonnie came back with an avalanche Spanish fly that Vic Joseph, for some reason, called a Phoenix Splash. Henley avoided a 450 with Jordan hitting a standout slam and One of a Kind, but JC Jane threw Henley's foot on the bottom rope. Henley kicked out of a fall, pushing Lonnie into the ropes where Jane was waiting with a rolling forearm. Fallon and caught her coming back with a famouser for the win. Clearly, there were a lot of issues in this match, Vic's miscall notwithstanding. Jordan was simply trying to do too much. Someone needs to rein her in. It's almost like she's trying to be Javon Evans, except he actually executes all of his moves. Less is more when you're learning, and Lonnie is not putting herself in the best position to be successful in the ring. I hate to be so critical of her because it sounds like it's a trend, but NXT is what pushed her, I should say, and approved her wrestling in this manner. She has such high upside, but she needs to tone it down a bit and be more deliberate in her matches. Once that's perfected, then she can expand. As a wise man once said, just do less.
Do less, get down, try less, do it again.
That's it. Just do less. By the way, that is a massively underrated movie, Forgetting Sarah Marshall. If you, for some reason, have not seen it and you like adult comedies, make sure you watch Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Obviously, I'm glad Fallon retained. I'm surprised she went with the Famouser instead of her Shining Wizard move. And that's just further crystallization of what I said a moment ago, that NXT badly needs to start naming finishers for talent and making moves specific. That way they matter and fans actually give a shit. All in all, this left a lot to be desired, but they did work hard, and credit for that. Shawn Spears and Brooks Jensen visited Tony D'Angelo in his Italian restaurant. There was a strange, almost Hallmark movie backing track during this segment. It was not good. Spears said he wouldn't let D'Angelo's disrespect slide a third time. Spears purported himself to be equal to the Don, saying his challenge was actually on behalf of Jensen, who's going to be successful because the hungriest always win. Spears and Jensen then got into an SUV with someone else named Nico driving them. That was Nico Vance, which is better than his real name, which was Skylar Clinton. He's a former UAB football player. Already has a better look than Jensen, by the way. Clearly, Spears is now building a crew, and this is his third person. To this point, it's been quite blah with both of them, really, Spears and Jensen, but he really turned on his character here and made the gimmick a little bit more interesting. Jensen should be an easy retention for D'Angelo, with Spears presumably coming in the future. It ultimately worked to help establish his group and motivation, but man, this dude has got to stop with these shirtless vests. It looks so freaking terrible. No one would ever walk around like that backstage at a wrestling show, let alone in public. I'm shocked he even got let into the restaurant that way. I don't care if it's at a casual Italian joint. If I owned a restaurant, there's no way a guy shirtless wearing a vest is coming into my establishment and having dinner. Just not happening. Ava held a summit in the NXT conference room to discuss the state of the tag team division. Josh Briggs was there by himself for some reason, so he walked out. The teams were all super mediocre. It got heated with all of them arguing, which excited Ava. And I know some of the other recent team-ups were in singles matches on this show, but man, was this a lackluster grouping. It's a good thing the main roster is loaded with tag teams right now, because none of these dudes are anywhere close to getting called up. Fraxium aside, of course. They're the champions, though. But these future challengers, there was not a single team in this group that I said, oh, yeah, they make sense as a team to beat Fraxium. Speaking of Fraxium, later backstage, they talked about the summit. Nathan Frazier informed Axiom that he secured himself an Iron Survivor opportunity. Frazier pointed out that Axiom competed in it previously, so he thought that it would be okay and that he'd have advice for him. Of course, Axiom was angry. Out the Mud came up talking shit to Axiom. That led the family to get his back, and this whole thing devolved. We later saw Dante Chen for some reason, and Hank and Tank praise King for his babyface work. Gallus interrupted. That set up their tag team match, presumably. The other teams later fought backstage with an 8 or 10-man brawl spilling into the ringside area as NXT went off the air to create some excitement at the close of the show. I kind of wish Fraxium would go away from like the breakup teases and begin thriving as a normal team, just given how dominant they have been, despite the odds that they've created for themselves. They really should be long-reigning champions. Now, look, they've held the titles for basically 200 of the last 220 days. It's a split reign. If you combine them, it's actually the longest reign since MSK in 2021. But again, it was split. And they've seemingly been at odds the entire last 3 months ever since winning the titles back. Maybe the way it ends will ultimately make sense, but Frazier is plainly an asshole as a character at this point. And then as the big brawl began, it's like I said, it's tough to buy into any of these teams So it's really just a shrug for me what we got here to end the show. If Javon and Ced were involved, I could see it. If some of the other team ups recently within the men's division, if they were involved, then I could say, okay, this makes a lot of sense. They're going to establish some of these other teams by having them beat the actual teams that exist, and then they're going to take the titles off for Axiom. But absolutely none of those teams that were brawling and are involved in whatever this is going to be, a mini tournament or a tournament without names, qualifying matches, whatever the case, none of them should beat for Axiom for the titles. Briggs backstage put over Yoshiki Inamura, I hope I said that right, to Ava as someone he trained alongside at Pro Wrestling Noah. Inamura is doing an excursion with NXT, and that was announced last week by Noah. Eddie Thorpe stormed in demanding 5 minutes after getting blown off twice, only to learn from Ava that he's actually been given an Iron Survivor opportunity. She could have saved herself a lot of aggravation by just, texting the guy, right? Informing him some way when he got to the arena that night. But I digress. I don't really want Thorpe in the main match. We'll have to see who he's matched up against. I would love to see Briggs involved in that. So if you give me Thorpe and Briggs wins and he's an Iron Survivor, I am down. But I just don't feel like Thorpe deserves it based on what he's done on television. He has a 2-week feud and then he disappears. And when he does have matches, they're 5 minutes long. So it's just odd. I really don't understand why it's so start and stop with him. I wonder if Briggs and Inamura, if they are not involved in Iron Survivor, if maybe they're teaming up, that would be okay. It seems like maybe a waste of Briggs since he's returned to NXT. I do think he was injured for a bit. I just want to see this guy utilized. He could be someone that is a North American champion and gets built up to the main event of the show, but they're just kind of stuck with him right now. Adriana Rizzo fought Nikita Lyons. On a positive note, Lyons had much better gear without all those stupid cutouts. That said, she looked like a mixture of Gold Dust and Golga, just without a mask. Nikita put Adriana in a full Nelson and then banged her head into the top rope a few times. She turned that into a slam, then slammed her hip into Rizzo's head a few times over the middle rope. She went back to a full Nelson. Rizzo countered the slam into an arm drag. It got even clunkier with Rizzo on offense. Lyons struggled taking moves and selling. She basically did 3 Thez presses. Not sure how many of them were planned. Nikita then hit a crescent kick and a Vader bomb to get the win. Rizzo delivered an overhead shot with a crowbar after the bell to stand tall because, of course, don't forget she got attacked and she wanted a modicum of revenge before this entire thing ended. We got the expected winner here. I'm not even sure really what to think about the match. Lyons seemed like she got blowed a bit in the latter stages, which is obviously not good. Rizzo probably wasn't ready to wrestle someone equally as inexperienced as her in the ring. This was easily the worst part of the show. I'm not going to sit here and call it awful. I just don't see how this experiment is going to work. They really need to stop trying to make Nikita Lyons happen.
Stop trying to make fetch happen. It's not going to happen.
Carmen Petrovic got distracted talking about Ashanti the Adonis while Dion Lennox was trying to mac on her. Adonis came in offended, saying Lennox was his best friend, which confused him because they've only kayfabe interacted one time. So Lennox suggested Adonis and Petrovic figure their shit out by teaming up and wrestling. That gave Brindley Reese the bright idea to team with Dion for a mixed tag team match next week. We saw later the women arguing while calmly seated backstage as the guys dapped each other up, still being friends. It was kind of random, but as I've said, there's something about this storyline that is hitting for me, so I'm here for seeing how this unfolds next week and really what becomes of all these pairings. And that wraps up NXT for the week. In terms of extraneous NXT items for us to discuss, there's really only one. They're going to be going back on the road in December, doing a show in Lowell, Massachusetts. And actually on buymeacoffee.com/gettingover, we teased this kind of happening. But the understanding right now is that NXT is going to look to do bi-monthly shows outside of the WWE Performance Center. Now, this looks like it's monthly. Obviously, they did 2 in October, 1 in November, now doing 1 in December. Again, the understanding from the person that I spoke with is that it's going to be bi-monthly, but this is just how they're doing it right now. We'll certainly see what happens as we move closer to WrestleMania season and then coming out of WrestleMania. Maybe they're ramping it up until then and then they go bi-monthly after the fact. But I love the idea. I think doing 3 Performance Center shows and 1 road show every month just makes a lot of sense. It's getting the talent in front of different fans, which is super important. Selling some tickets, even though they're not going to make that much money out of it. Hopefully they combine it in a local area with Raw because it is Monday and Tuesday. And I'm sure from a production standpoint, that makes a lot of sense. So I just really like that they're doing it. It's something I've long thought they needed to do. And when you combine that with the PLEs and you look at, maybe in a given year, they're doing 10 to 12 events outside of the WWE Performance Center, that's really solid. And if they want to increase that to, 15 or 16, then the talent is only going to be better off for it at the end of the day. Moving over to AEW, I wanted to start off with a slight correction from last week. I thought Chris Statlander was hit by the SUV that was driven by Camille, and Mercedes Moné was in the passenger seat. And I figured she got hit. She jumped up, beat the shit out of both of them. And I was going crazy about how that made her look like a superwoman. It made no sense. Turns out Mercedes was actually mad. And this, of course, makes a lot more sense because Camille failed to hit Stat with the SUV. That said, she still almost got hit by a car, jumped up, and again beat the shit out of them 2-on-1, which still made Monet and Camille look pathetic. So opinion stands, but certainly the description and understanding of that segment, I was off. Silver King makes his corrections when rarely necessary. Now moving into the breakdown of AEW this week, 9 of 17 matches were storyline relevant, reaching a rare mark by hitting above 50% at 53%. So that's great. Helping that along were a couple tournament qualifying matches and 1 week, sometimes 1 day builds, which are obviously thin, but they still count. Obviously, we need this at 66% or above weekly, but credit where it's due for this week. It is rare that they even reach that mark. We're going to break down, of course, Dynamite, Collision, and Rampage all together based on storyline. And we're going to kick it off with something that happened on Collision. The Death Riders beat the Conglomeration in a 19-minute trios match. Jon Moxley entered with everyone involved in the ring down and out. He got onto the ring apron, and then Orange Cassidy strolled out, which led Mox to step down, as commentary told us Mox could not have expected this. Why not? Orange's friends were all wrestling. He's challenging Mox for the title. They're under potential threat of attack, so he came out to save them. That's why. Suddenly, everyone was okay. The match continued. Kyle O'Reilly got hit with a briefcase ringside as Wheeler Yuta added a Bazaiku knee for the win. Cassidy then punched Yuta and hit Mox with a tope. Marina Shafir got him out of dodge, and everyone else brawled. Mox being afraid of Cassidy was like the height of absurdity. Orange staring him down like he's somehow a badass wasn't far off from that. This is just the tip of the iceberg, but I fail to understand why the Death Riders are content to just wait around for 2 hours for their match to start when it's Collision. But on Dynamite, they want to take over the entire show and destroy AEW from the inside out. But even then, sometimes they don't show up until hour 2. Just a lot of frustration with this. And that really leads me into something else. It was advertised 4 days ahead of the show that Mox would appear on Dynamite to seize control of the Superstation TBS. That's a quote. That's how this was promoted. Seizing control of the station. This was an early and obvious indicator that something was wrong with this booking. If a bad actor like Mox plans on, let's say, doing a hostile takeover of a show, or in an even more extreme fashion, an entire station, why would he first tell his employer of the company he is trying to take over that he's going to do that? And why would his employer not only promote it, but do absolutely nothing to stop it from happening? The seizure of a show or station is not something one promotes. It's something one actively tries to stop from happening. What you promote is Mox promising destruction on Dynamite, leaving fans to ask, what exactly is he going to do? And then when they tune in and see what he's doing, he surprises and delights by actually taking over the show or station. A hook at the top of the show that should ideally keep viewers engaged to see what is actually going to happen now that this lunatic has total power over the program. Are the matches going to get scrapped? Are people going to get their asses kicked? How many wrestlers tonight are going to get asphyxiated in the middle of the ring? There's a lot of stupidity happening around the world and in this country right now. I'll spare you most of it because you don't want me talking about those subjects here. But even in the lightest terms, we have a cable TV news host about to take one of the most important positions in our government. Some people think humans can literally control the weather, not through climate change, but literally deciding when and where to create and direct hurricanes. Aaron Boone is still the manager of my New York Yankees after the least disciplined World Series effort of all time. People continue to watch The Masked Singer for some reason on Fox. Folks believe the NFL is actively rigging Chiefs games to give Taylor Swift more airtime. The Rock is out here comparing watching Red One to Oppenheimer, last year's Best Picture. This stupid non-controversy over Michael Strahan and the national anthem. My HOA won't let me paint my house light gray with navy trim, despite both the light gray and the navy being on their approved list of colors. Apparently, gray only goes with green and navy only goes with white. A lizard somehow knocked a laptop off one of my tables. It fell corner first straight onto my big toe a week ago. Okay, that last one's me airing grievances. You get my point. There is stupidity everywhere. In wrestling, at least, this takes the cake. I'm fine with R-Truth stupidity, Chelsea Green and Harley Cameron stupidity. That shit's fun. This is fucking idiotic. The promotion of this Mox segment, folks, it was total and utter stupidity. It was AEW trying to gain and retain viewers with a nonsensical hook that, spoiler alert, was ultimately total and utter false advertising. And it was again proof that AEW has this continued problem where they promote what should be surprises and surprise with stuff that should be promoted. It is immensely frustrating. So let's go ahead and talk about it. Mox did not do anything until the start of Hour 2 on Dynamite. Again, he's taking over the Superstation, TBS. He's seizing it. He doesn't even show up until Hour 2. Claudio Castagnoli starts this whole thing by randomly beating the shit out of J.D. Drake with a chair, a tomato can. Then Mox hits the ring. He blamed Orange for saving neither Chuck Taylor nor Yuta from him. Mox said the pressure is building for Cassidy and he'll make an example out of him by brutalizing him. Mox said he commands the AEW championship and because of that, they have all the power. So Orange came out with Mark Briscoe and Rocky Romero, super intimidating, saying Mox holds the AEW title, which represents everything wrestling can be. Huh? Cassidy said, quote, "At Full Gear, we're going to wrestle, and I'm going to beat you again, and I'm going to take the power back." That was his big line. Cassidy said he had pawns to get rid of first, so he would wrestle Yuta next week to clear the path and take the king. Mox replied with his only final message, abandon all hope. That was it. As the Death Riders, without Pac for some reason, went to leave through the crowd, Darby Allin splashed them off of Vom in a purple Sting mask, with the conglomeration brawling them away. They all tried to drive off in a pickup truck, but Allin jumped in the bed, so Claudio lifted him out of it, rammed him into the metal garage door, and then did the swing into the door with Darby just getting flattened. And it was easily the best part of the entire segment. Claudio's transition into a total and utter bloodthirsty badass has been the best part of this entire storyline. But then he gets back in the truck, Yuta jumps in the bed, and they all leave. So that was Moxley seizing control of the show, going to the ring and cutting a promo like he has done every fucking week since this gimmick started. You could even argue it was the least impactful of his appearances because previously they've had segments where the writers have beaten the ever-loving shit out of like a dozen people. In fact, they've had episodes where a dozen people or more are waiting for them to arrive. And if you're promoting Mox seizing control of the Superstation TBS, shouldn't those same people have been waiting for them to arrive again? What exactly was seized here? How was this night different from all other nights? When you promote something like this, viewers are led to believe there's going to be a hostile takeover of some kind, throwing out the rules, interrupting matches to beat the shit out of people, holding wrestlers or commentary or whomever hostage until you get what you want. They specifically said he was seizing control of the Superstation TBS, by the way, using the old logo and graphics from the 90s for really no reason whatsoever. That would indicate, though, taking over the production truck and the broadcast, cutting off interviews. Maybe AEW could have done something fun and actually changed the graphics packages and stuff like that. Instead, they literally did nothing.
Market zero!
Why was this promoted as a seizure? He addressed another wrestler. That's it. You want to talk about over-advertising and under-delivering? This was that. The absolute height of absurdity. Promotional malpractice. By the way, what did the old TBS logo or the station at large even have to do with this? He didn't take over Dynamite let alone an entire station. And then you have Orange out there trying to look like a badass, talking about how important wrestling is and how great of a wrestler he is. And then he makes a fine but boring chess reference and believes the best way to go after the king is by taking out a singular pawn, the least intimidating of all the chess pieces, the least valuable. With one show to go before Full Gear, that's what he has to say. Wouldn't you go after the rook or the bishop or the knight? I mean, I haven't been in a chess club in like 30 years, but I still know how to play the game. And by the way, how to book wrestling. Yes, there is more storyline with Wheeler than the others. There's no doubt about that. Of course, they've been telling us that on television. But if you're actually wanting to impact the match and help your chances of winning, you're going after Claudio or Pac, not the loser of the group. None of this worked. The crowd was bored to tears as Cassidy spoke. The only real pop for anything was Darby Allin, and that was cool again. Both him jumping on them and the attack in the parking lot, that was cool. But the entire promotion of this episode and this appearance by Mox was not only a huge nothing burger, it was blatant false advertising. They're also arguing over a title that Mox does not want to even feature. He has it stashed away in a briefcase. It was a colossal waste of time that accomplished nothing, coming off a Collision segment that was nonsensical on its own, with Mox somehow being intimidated by Orange Cassidy, of all people. Most of you listen to this show weekly. You know I was into this storyline at the very beginning, despite some reservations. And I've largely been patient to see it develop, even as those reservations and concerns continuously grew. But that patience is wearing thin, and it's near vanishing at this point. Primarily because, look, there is a fundamental issue with the Death Rider story. And that is having Mox come out week after week talking about there being this huge paradigm shift and how nothing is going to be the same once they take over. Except outside of their segments, the rest of the show just kind of moseys along normally. It's tough to believe in that when on the same episode, you have the Outrunners doing their shtick, or Top Flight beating a couple jobbers and doing their airline entrance, or Commander and Hologram doing their flippy lucha stuff. And with 5 hours of TV each week, you have to have all of that. But it actively hurts the impact of Mox and the Death Riders because there is no paradigm shift happening across the show. Are they disruptors or are they not? If they are, where is the company-wide concerted effort to stop them? They talk about restoring AEW, but other than beating the shit out of some people, what does that actually mean? What is their planned outcome? If everything works out, what is AEW going to look like? Unless there is something massive that's going to be happening at Full Gear that's going to prove all of this were baby steps, setting up something much larger, it really feels like this is fully going off the reservation, really the exact same way that the Elite storyline did. Now, moving off of all that, Swerve Strickland versus Bobby Lashley at Full Gear was announced, I shit you not, in a 5-second promo that was a transition segment to a Lio Rush backstage promo that followed an FTR House of Black confrontation on Collision. That's how AEW announced one of their biggest matches on this card. I don't understand why they downplay their own shit like that. I mean, I hate when WWE just throws it out on social media, but they're at least trying to create news out of it. This was just a throwaway on a Saturday show being watched by 200,000 people. On Rampage, Lio Rush beat Commander in 12 minutes. If that sounds familiar, it was literally a rematch from last week, different outcome. I guess they're going to do a series out of it. There was no build to it. Nothing about Lio wanting a rematch or anything. They just did it. On Collision, Lio said he felt a shift happening, which is why he held on to the Hurt Syndicate card. He called it a golden ticket, telling the guys he's nearly on fire because he beat Commander and Ari Daivari over the last couple of weeks. Wow, what an accomplishment. Then he called out Swerve for a Dynamite match. It was sensible storytelling to a degree, but if MVP already gave Rush his card, why exactly does he feel like he needs to prove himself? That's literally the invitation, isn't it? On Collision, the Acclaimed cut a promo on LFI ahead of their qualifying match next week. Max Caster was kind of making an ass of himself when Hurt Syndicate interrupted with MVP trying to wedge drive and get into Caster's head. The first words spoken by Lashley on AEW TV came here. Should have hit him in the mouth. That's all he said. My hope when these guys went over to AEW is that the group would differentiate itself somehow from the WWE unit, but it's not lost on me that, look, they're only recruiting other black talent at this point, which is something fans heavily criticized in WWE. I presume there will be a surprise person linking up with them at some point, but really, who knows? On Dynamite, Lashley was interviewed backstage looking his best yet suit-wise. Really sharp. I loved the color of his suit. MVP interrupted to ask how it will feel to end Swerve's career in 2 weeks, Lashley promised to hurt Swerve and make an example out of him. That was it. Totally fine, but also still lacking any character development or explanation about his role, or I'm here in AEW to do this or that. Just nothing. 2 weeks now. On Dynamite, Swerve fought Leo. Lots of avoidance moves to start, including a spot where Rush backflipped off the ring apron as Swerve flipped himself completely out of the ring without either touching the other. Swerve caught an attempted Hurricanrana off the announce table, and after more athletic counters ringside ate a Poison Rana and Tope Suicida, Leo hit a frog splash and basement Insecurity. As Tony Schiavone told us, a match almost entirely featuring counters was amazing. Swerve ultimately caught Rush for Big Pressure, which is now the name of the JML driver, for the win. He called it amazing. Amazing it was not. Ridiculous it was. Unless you prefer wrestlers wrestling and not touching each other. Swerve cut a promo after the bell, daring Lashley to meet him in the ring, saying he didn't want to wait for Full Gear. He called it Stamford, Connecticut, which is obviously the home of WWE. They were in Bridgeport, which is a decent ways away, I think 30 to 40 minutes. In fact, after MVP and Lashley entered to respond, fans loudly chanted, "This is Bridgeport," which was embarrassing. MVP was saying perhaps another member of the syndicate would fight Swerve, except Lashley took off his jacket and undid his shirt. So MVP said, okay, well, maybe Lashley's going to fight you. And then he didn't, and it was Shelton Benjamin, of course, attacking from behind. Lashley leveled Swerve after he ran him into the barricade a few times. Shelton prevented Prince Nana from getting involved. MVP then choked out Nana with his cane as Lashley slammed Swerve and put him in the full Nelson. Leo watched all of this, didn't help Swerve. Lashley threw Nana into the post, and that pretty much ended it. And the fans, I shit you not, again chanted Bridgeport as this ended, which was just, again, really embarrassing. The way this transpired, I figured there was going to be a new Hurt Syndicate member who was going to show himself. Maybe Rush was going to be the one to attack Swerve from behind and join them. That would have made a ton of sense with this as the setup. Now, look, I was fine with the attack as it went down. It was just a bit strange to verbalize it the way they did. Swerve getting his ass beat with no one helping him, that does make sense given his history. Lashley got a few licks in, that was positive, and it did ratchet up intensity for their match. So overall, it was good, but it was just oddly constructed. On Dynamite, Jay White and Juice Robinson fought Hangman Page and Christian Cage. This opened the show commercial-free. Hook attacked Nick Wayne out of the crowd during the match, with neither Kip Sabian nor his own mother willing to do anything about it. White reversed kill switch into a DDT. Hangman then gouged his eyes in clear view of the referee, who did nothing. Page hit an avalanche fall-away slam on Juice. Robinson first kind of fell, but they fixed it, which was nice. Then he did a pop-up Liger Bomb. There were a bunch of finisher counters with no tagging. White took out Cage with Blade Runner into the barricade. That was a great spot. Shayna Wayne distracted too early, but eventually Robinson got brained with the contract, and he ate Deadeye for the heel victory. Juice was obviously the fall guy here. That was fine. Good work across the board from all four guys. An entertaining opening match. White got the star ahead of Full Gear, which is a probably situation where he's going to lose. Probably a situation where he's going to lose is what I was trying to say. Not much in the way of storyline development when it comes to these two, but the go-home's next week, so there is still time to get to that. On Rampage, Undisputed Kingdom beat Dark Order and the Infantry in 9 minutes. Lance Archer and Brian Cage destroyed them after the bell. Roderick Strong backstage blamed it on MJF paying the Don Callis family. Jake Roberts then confronted Strong, telling him to stay away from the Beast Mortos. Despite Strong and Mortos being boys, he wanted to fight him just to notch another win, and that was all the stuff that happened. On Collision, Strong beat Mortos in 10 minutes. Roddy sold his ass off here. He ultimately won with a jumping knee. Archer attacked him after the bell. And look, I'm actually enjoying the Archer and Cage pairing, even if it's something that just happened. But they aren't being done any favors here. I'm also realizing they're not even involved in the tag team series, which is dumb because they're a big dominant tag team that should be getting a title opportunity potentially. Roosh later yelled at Mortos for losing and then pumped him up for revenge next week. Mortos kept roaring and shit as he was talking, which made what Roosh was saying tough to hear. On Dynamite, Will Ospreay called out Kyle Fletcher, who said Don Callis' family is not far behind him if he tries to start some shit. Ospreay knew Fletcher had a weapon and tossed it aside, repeating their history, demanding answers. Fletcher admitted Ospreay helped him, but said it was all self-serving, which made no sense whatsoever. Then he repeated that he turned on Ospreay just like Will did to Kenny Omega and Kazuchika Okada. So Ospreay properly called him a hypocrite, saying, "You're clearly trying to be like me, even though you say you're not, because you attacked me the same way that you say I attacked them." Fletcher challenged for Full Gear. Ospreay decided to give him 5 minutes of fame. Ospreay got convoluted talking about the Tiger Driver, making his left hand numb, and now he couldn't feel his son's hand when he held it. It was just a whole bunch of shit. And Fletcher said he would hurt him worse than that. Archer, Cage, and Powerhouse Hobbs, along with Mark Davis, all came out for a brawl. Then, as everyone fought backstage, Strong attacked Archer on the stage with a kendo stick, and the referee rang the bell for a Falls Count Anywhere match that just so happened to be the stipulation, despite nothing about their prior brawl necessitating a Falls Count Anywhere match. Now, before we get to that match, let's talk about Ospreay and Fletcher. It was a solid enough face-to-face, nothing overly memorable, really just a lot of talking that didn't go anywhere. We already heard 75% of the stuff they said to one another, but it worked as a means of creating a pay-per-view match. I presume the 6-man with these sides will happen on the Go Home Dynamite or something like that. So yeah, it was solid, but it just wasn't really notable in any way. So again, Strong and Archer Falls Count Anywhere. This became 2-on-1 after commercial with Cage helping Archer. Kingdom saved. Archer chokeslammed Matt Taven off a barricade into 2 security guards, but they got there late. So they just stood on the barricade for like 20 or 30 seconds waiting for them first. Strong ultimately hit Archer with a chair and did a regular pump knee jumping over the same barricade for the 1-2-3 into the crowd. Really lacking match, just given the stipulation that allows for fun and creativity. We didn't really get much of that here. Strong was exhausted coming out of this. It clearly did take a lot out of him. He cut a brief promo in the ring after, saying now that he won his 3rd match, he would finish MJF for good at Full Gear. Konosuke Takeshita attacked, and Adam Cole saved by walking somewhat normally to the ring. This led directly into their match with the bell ringing and Cole's music continuing to play, only so that after he threw Takeshita out of the ring, he could do the boom and Adam Cole baby just for the pops. Now, this was a clear effort to keep viewers engaged from one segment to the next by merging all 3 of them together. It worked the first time. It felt immensely forced doing it back to back in 3 straight segments. And it was very reminiscent of WWE trying to do similar stuff like this to keep ratings. And it never worked. And WWE went away from it. And AEW probably should as well. Again, if you want to merge 2 segments together, that's great. But trying to do 3 or 4, it just comes across as real try hard and real ridiculous. On Dynamite, Cole, Takeshita. Best spot of the entire show was Takeshita catching a Panama Sunrise, spinning Cole around, and then hitting a Tombstone pile driver, then moving that into a high-effort German suplex. Of course, Cole hit a Sunrise 30 to 45 seconds anyway later. Takeshita grabbed MJF's ring from underneath the ring and punched Cole in the head through the ropes to get the 1-2-3. Now, I was ready to criticize this, thinking Cole was going to kick out because this ring has KO'd so many people, and for him to kick out of it wouldn't make any sense. But AEW kept the kayfabe of the ring, even with the delayed cover. We saw footage of MJF laughing at the outcome, and then Strong attacked Takeshita, only to eat a full kick low blow. He went to use the ring again when O'Reilly saved. Ricochet then athletically kicked Takeshita on the stage while wearing a suit. Then he held up the international title. Despite making the save, O'Reilly refused to shake Cole's hand when this whole thing was over. This was legitimately one of the most sensible pieces of booking that AEW has put together in a while. O'Reilly saving his friends because he's been watching all their matches and Kingdom was unavailable. That was a smart way to reintroduce them along their side. We spoke last week about Takeshita losing in this spot being a horrendous decision if it happened. And not only did that not happen, he won and he got some heat doing it. I obviously hate the whole diamond ring thing because there's no scenario where being hit with that would result in someone getting knocked out, especially at the forehead. But it's been used a half dozen times or more in that exact manner, and every time the person has gotten knocked out. So to that end, at least there's consistency. Again, it's one thing if I don't like something. It's another if it doesn't make sense. So at least it made sense. What would make even more sense based on this is Strong and Takeshita, but you can't have either of them lose ahead of pay-per-view matches. Now we get Strong and MJF at Full Gear. That delays Cole until World's End, which is where he originally broke MJF. So even that makes sense. It's a nice parallel. And hopefully between now and then, the story between them gets juicier and begins making more sense because, look, to this point, it has been all over the place. And you guys all know that no one really wanted MJF and Cole together when it looked like they had been separated in storyline. You see how fun it is to actually sink your teeth into AEW booking and have a real breakdown about what's going on and what might happen next? All it takes is logic and sensible storytelling, and then we get to do that. This is why I criticize so many other parts of their product, because it doesn't meet these simple criteria that allow us to expand and have real conversations about it. This, good stuff overall, and I'll remind, this is a storyline I believe should not even be happening, yet I liked it on Wednesday in a silo. I still dislike it in totality, of course. And if you wanted to take a look at it from the other side, having Cole lose to Takeshita made his win over Malachi Black kind of worthless and frustrating. So that would be my one criticism coming out of it. But with Malachi, we'll just kind of have to see what they're doing, although we have an indication of it based on what else happened across AEW television. So let's go ahead and get to all of that now. On Collision, House of Black beat the Iron Savages in 3 minutes. This opened the show, and we were told, I shit you not, that it was a massive trios match. Massive.
Off is the direction you can fuck.
FTR interrupted afterward with Dax Harwood doing another promo about loving AEW and the tag team titles. He asked who would step forward. It was Malachi and Brody King. That was the entire segment, literally. On Collision, there was a vignette showing Julia Hart cheerleading, only for the dark version of herself to be watching in the stands, messing with her psyche. Then that dark version shot her through the heart with a bow and arrow, saying you'll never be good enough. And then Julia woke up from a nightmare having imagined all of this. This was legitimately, I mean this, the best thing across 3 hours of AEW weekend television. Something unique and inventive and intriguing. I now actually care about her return. On Dynamite, Jamie Hayter backstage was proud of beating nobody since returning. She said she was going to come after one thing when the screen cut off, and we got the continuation of the Julia vignette. She picked up the phone, hearing Brody's voice telling her it's time to come home. Then she realized the phone was not plugged in, so she washed her face in the bathroom and opened a closet door with a bright red light, and something handed her the same bow and arrow and hat that we saw in the prior segment from Collision. The Hayter stuff was shit. Her return continues to be a huge wasted opportunity. The Hart stuff, again, popped me. I really love the visuals, the way they're building her comeback. Definitely interested in seeing the next couple vignettes and how all of this ties together. Also, whether she undergoes any character changes or whether the group undergoes any character changes. On Rampage, Top Flight beat Beef and Drake in 8 minutes. They got rid of the dumb costumes, but apparently still do the whole airplane entrance. Wholly unimpressive as a match. They did a handshake thing after the match with Action Andretti participating, even though he's been a heel, basically. He's been telling a story of that he has heel tendencies and he doesn't want to be a good guy and all this type of stuff. So it was totally incongruent that he shook the hands of baby faces after the match. Let's move to the Full Gear 4-way tag team qualifying matches. First, the Outrunners beat Top Flight in 10 minutes on Collision. They're going to be participating in their first pay-per-view match as a result. Really nice pop for them as usual, and FTR was pleased to see that backstage. On Dynamite, we had FTR against Kings of the Black Throne. Extremely strong wrestling match, as you would expect. FTR hit power, but King got knees up for glory. FTR then prevented Dante's Inferno and hit Shatter Machine with a delayed cover on a broken fall. They took out Black with a spike pile driver on the apron, only to eat a big meaty tope suicida from King. Dax Harwood kicked out of 2 huge lariats at 2.9, then got put in a standing sleeper while pretty much already unconscious, with the heels getting the victory, except they got cheered as faces. Fans wanted it, and they all shook hands after the bell. I went 3.75 stars, B+ for this. It was borderline A-, but I'm at B+. And I was pleased that the fans cheered for Kings of the Black Throne because they're interesting. And FTR is boring as sin these days. Everything they do is super repetitive. House of Black, as far as I'm concerned, I said it last week, they remain one of the best groups in AEW when actually given opportunities. Excalibur called this the biggest win of their careers, which was frankly ridiculous and clearly false. But they belonged in the 4-way on pay-per-view, so it was absolutely the right booking as far as I was concerned. And that was a surprise for me because I just kind of assumed coming in that FTR was getting the win. So a couple matches this week in AEW where they countered my expectation, and that was a huge positive. There's been no follow-up with Black individually coming out of the whole deal with Cole a couple weeks ago, and now he's just succeeding in a tag team feud. So that remains confusing. Maybe the entire group is going to get refreshed in some way once Hart comes back. But all in all, a quality main event and the best match across all 5 hours of AEW TV this week. On Collision, Mariah May said in a tape promo that she hates women's wrestling because everyone that surrounds her as contenders is pathetic. She said it's her division and she should be thanked for wasting her prime on them. Anna Jay responded in a separate promo that she could beat her and would choke her out until she pisses herself if given another opportunity. She asked for a third match, this time no disqualification, promising to never challenge for the title again if she loses. Not at all a match I wanted to run back. It really tells you the state of the women's division right now, with them having nowhere else to go but this. Interestingly enough, the match planned for Dynamite was scrapped due to illness. Now, normally what you would do is bubble up another women's storyline to take that spot. Except in AEW, given they have one match per show usually and barely do women's storylines outside of that 2-month span where they had like 3 or 4 at the same time. They booked a random match that included the like third return of Britt Baker in the last couple of months. So we had Baker against Penelope Ford. Late in the match, Ford hit a nice handspring back elbow and a running boot. Then she licked Baker for no reason. Britt came back with a ripcord elbow. Then Penelope avoided a rotating clothesline by bending over backwards, only for a really odd sequence. I think Ford did a Pele kick while Baker tried to cut her. I mean, that's what it looked like. They called it a cutter. It was extremely strange. Baker avoided a moonsault and hit a neck breaker. Then she took far too long putting on her glove. That allowed Ford to attack her from behind and put her in the Mutalock. Given their faces were next to each other, Baker reached up for lockjaw simultaneously and got the win. The match was terrible, but I loved the inventiveness of the finishing sequence. Actually, I wish Ford stayed on her back and didn't get turned over, because that would have looked way cooler. Serena Deeb came out with her stupid flag to talk trash from the stage. Baker said, "Nobody cares," 4 different times off mic. I mean, yeah, nobody does care. And yikes, why would you say that? They literally just fought last month. Baker's last match was against Deeb, and they're going to do it again, coming out of her beating Ford, who she wasn't even feuding. This is AEW's women's division. On Collision, the TNT title was on the line. Jack Perry retained over Action Andretti in 10 minutes. This was another open challenge that was never actually open. Commentary reminded that he's been champion for 4 months, and I realized that there legitimately has not been an even somewhat memorable TNT title reign since Darby Allin and Miro had it in 2021. That's how long it's been since the TNT title has actually mattered. Daniel Garcia confronted Perry for a 3rd time, calling him a multi-millionaire Nepo baby who is just acting destitute with his stupid bus. Garcia cut a super babyface promo about fighting for the fans and the people in the back, promising he would never be like Perry other than being TNT champion. Jack granted him a Full Gear match, but said he's not ready. Daddy Magic later boosted Garcia's confidence, saying, guess what? He is indeed ready. I'm ready too. I'm ready for these segments to end. Last week's Garcia-Perry segment was an upgrade. This was a downgrade. Garcia comes across as super tryhard. Perry comes across as like character deficient. Hopefully Garcia does take the title and actually has a decent run, because this reign has been absolute dog shit. On Collision, Stat beat a jobber in 45 seconds. That was it. Monet caught her with a backstabber and bank statement, Monet statement, whatever the hell it's called after the bell. So basically just a repeat. And then backstage at Dynamite, Mercedes bullied Camille a bit and then talked shit about Stat, who stood behind her listening. She immediately disposed of Camille again, then did a short-range spear of both of them through a clearly fake wall, with AEW quickly leaving the scene, not soaking in the momentousness of it all, similar to what they did when Samoa Joe did the whole wall spear situation. They stayed on that for a long time. Here they just cut away because it's the women, and heaven forbid they get any extra time on TV. Camille might be the most worthless heavy in wrestling history. And I say that as we simultaneously watch Raquel Rodriguez do a bunch of nothing in WWE. At least Raquel's gotten a moment or two, and she's looked strong in matches. What exactly is the point of Camille? Why is she with Mercedes Moné? She doesn't help her win matches. She doesn't protect her from attackers. Why is she with her?
0.0.
It's also crazy that this is getting so little time to build. Yeah, they're on a lot of shows, but every segment is short, frequently random, and it just starts and ends, and that's really it. I don't understand what they're doing here. On Dynamite, Chris Jericho backstage cut a promo making fun of Tomohiro Ishii. He said he was once his young boy in Japan. During a live promo, Jericho referenced a 2022 match of theirs, and somehow footage was ready to show right as he was speaking. Chris ultimately accepted what was an ROH title challenge in 2 weeks on Dynamite, figured it was going to be at the ROH pay-per-view, thought it might be at Full Gear. Neither. It's going to be on TV. That's a huge positive. We all knew the match was coming, and we all know, of course, that Jericho will win coming out of it. On Collision, Nick Wayne beat AR Fox in 9 minutes. Before the match, Wayne was pleased it was the anniversary of Fox's father's passing, and he said it's good he's dead because he'll be embarrassed at his son's forthcoming loss. Solid confidence in the promo, but material, yuck. Wayne ultimately won with a dragon suplex and a double underhook Canadian destroyer, which was really cool. Then he stapled a picture of Fox's father to his head. And that did get a little bit of heat. It was odd to go to those lengths for a low-card storyline that is not going to result in anything. Like, what did that actually accomplish? Also, Kip Sabian, he claps strangely. I want you to watch him when he tries to clap. It's pretty weird. On Rampage, Deonna Purrazzo and Taya Valkyrie had a coffee date wearing black trench coats, talking about getting revenge on people who have wronged them. They continue to look good as a duo. And their name, The Vendetta, works. But how many weeks has it been with them talking and saying nothing and absolutely zero happening? On Rampage, Harley Cameron backstage recapped her wild 2024 in typically wacky fashion. Again, fun from her, but it was completely pointless as a TV segment. On Dynamite, Renee welcomed Mina Shirakawa back, only for Harley to interrupt and chug her champagne, challenging her to a tit-for-tit match. Rack them up with the breast woman winning. Then they literally stood there, shaking their chests simultaneously to end this segment. Now, look, I don't want you to dare get Silver King wrong here.
Gonna look good, but she's got me saying, hey now!
And look, with Renee standing right between them,
it should have been me. It should have been me.
huge talents, incredible live show charisma. But also, we do have to be honest here.
Are you fucking kidding me?
That's what they're basing a match around. Yeah, that's great women's storytelling, AEW. Real modern. Could you imagine if WWE did anything close to this in 2024? People were criticizing Rhea Ripley for shaking her butt at a house show that fans happened to catch on screen, and they had some fun with it. Could you imagine if this happened on Raw or SmackDown? WWE would be raked through the coals publicly and by the IWC. But when it's AEW, it's okay. No one gives a shit. Despite them, of course, supposedly trying to make women's wrestling real in their company. And yet, despite all the major additions and all the promises, it's still the same bullshit, and they're barely putting matches on television, and they're barely telling storylines. Speaking of, on Rampage, Hikaru Shida beat Viva Van in 5 minutes for no reason whatsoever. On Collision, MXM Collection announced that Johnny TV told them to slide in his DMs, so they requested he join them for a trios match. He declined because he already had a singles match, so they're going to join him ringside for that instead. There were a couple funny moments here with MXM doing Johnny's pose and getting wheeled in the wrong direction off the screen. They are enjoyable comedically. You know, the way they're getting used, I guess, is okay. I just really hated the stuff with Acclaimed, but everything else they've done has been pretty okay. So that really wraps up AEW this week, and we did end up finishing the show rather late, so that does give us an opportunity to talk about the ratings for NXT and Dynamite. NXT this week, back on its normal night, pulled in 631,000 viewers in a 0.16 demo, up from the last 2 weeks, which of course had major competition, down from 3 weeks ago, which was the third show on the CW, which was 702, but the same demo. So what was really impressive about NXT is not so much this week's rating, which was what I would call normal, right? Where you would expect it to be. What was impressive was their rating last week, and the fact that it was actually higher from a demo standpoint and extremely similar from a viewership standpoint, despite being on Wednesday, a different night, going up head-to-head against another wrestling show in AEW Dynamite that, by the way, it beat head-to-head. So this week's rating, pretty much meaningless, but nevertheless, solid. Dynamite on Wednesday checked in with 666,000 viewers and a 0.22 demo. That is their highest rating since October 2nd, but they haven't hit 700,000 viewers since September 25th, which of course was a downgraded mark. Previously, it was 800,000, which they of course have not hit since April 10th. And we're not going to go about 900 and a million, but you know, those were numbers they were regularly hitting in the past. So this does mark the 7th straight week below 700,000 viewers, but it was the highest demo since September 25th. And that certainly is a step in the right direction, given they went commercial free at the start of the show, given they advertised Mox seizing control of the Superstation TBS, which was supposed to be a big hook for the show. You know, I'm not going to say the rating was good or bad, solid or disappointing, but, you know, with all of that, you know, being put into it, I'm sure the hope was that they would do better than this number. And of course, 666, that is never a great omen. So nothing huge, you know, to take away from these ratings this week, but those are the numbers. And that was the breakdown. It also allows us to wrap up this edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. And we start that by the Silver King reminding you that this show
It's all about defied.
So head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify, leave a 5-star rating on Apple, take a little extra time, leave a 5-star written review if you do. We'll read it live right here on the show. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast. Follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast, and follow us on Blue Sky at Getting Over, the latter two for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. And please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do as well, $5 a month, $50 for the entire year. You can become an official Getting Overhead. Visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You get the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reaction audio to every major TV show, and exclusive news analysis posts every week. Again, buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. That wraps it up for today's show. We will be back on Tuesday talking all things WWE, but this is the Silver King signing off and leaving you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.